Today on TCIP, we talk about our favorite super villains.
That's probably just what you would be expecting.
Or is it?
This is Jerry.
This is Lane.
This is Dave. And you are listening to the Creative Impulse Podcast.
What is a villain? Is a villain a real thing? Is it just a figment of fiction? Well, I chose Colonel Kurtz, the shark from Jaws.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I don't consider him a villain.
Well, that's part of the joy of talking about it.
Okay.
That's the whole point. Is that he's a.
Why do you consider?
Well,
him
Well, that's the whole thing. Is that my take? I don't believe in villains. I really don't believe in this. Although you said pick villains, I don't believe in villains. I think there are just two opposing forces or two opposing ideologies, and that's why I kind of thought that the shark might be an interesting or an ironic choice. I thought that might lead to some interesting conversation.
Well, they say that villains see themselves as heroes in their own story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the shark's just trying to survive.
That's just a force of nature,
right?
In that instance.
And the shark is a villain relative to us, but. Is the shark really? The shark is just doing his thing. He's just hungry. He sees some people, and in fact, maybe and arguably, the shark is the victim. He's just trying to survive, and these people come out and hunt him, and then they wind up blowing him up.
The ocean is his home.
That's right, and we
exactly.
He's really we're the villain.
Because he's not a villain, I guess you failed to come up with a good villain. Is that what you're saying?
I think you're the villain. I think you're trying to make me a villain, but you're a villain. Wait. Let's all do villain laughs.
Yes.
Let's have a contest. Best villain laugh. Ready? I'm gonna do mine first. I tapped into an evil place.
Right.
Let me do. I really laugh that way. That's pretty damn good. That is pretty damn good.
I don't want to fall for that.
No, dude, you got to do it. You just give
That's
us
a good ender.
Give us something, man. You have a really nice little villain laugh. It's really nice.
That'd be something for like a personal ad. Has good looking for significant other with good villain laugh.
Oh shit!
Do you have any special skills?
Some villains have like PhD, like they're Doctor this, so like Doctor Evil, Doctor Doom. Like, what is it with villains having PhDs, having?
It's like saying, "Look at me, I am smart." There is a doctor after my name. Although maybe they got it from like University of American Samoa. Now that's not to put any kind of like negative connotations to University of American Samoans. Yeah, because I know they're a sizable block of our listeners. I would really hate to offend them.
We do pretty well in Samoa.
I was just thinking I'll talk about Colonel Kurtz. I think the interesting thing about Colonel Kurtz is that he's the villain on a superficial level, but really he's exposing ourselves as the villain, that we're our own villains, because he taps into that. I think what he's doing is, or in a representative sense, is he represents the villainy or the darkness that's in everybody, that's manifest in war, and I think that's
potential for evil.
Yes, he's embracing that, and he's saying that's just a part of who we are.
But you have no right to judge me. Horror and moral terror are your friends. If they are not, then they are enemies to be feared.
Which goes back to this idea that maybe so once again, is it good and evil from what vantage point? Is it part of being human to just do good things and do bad things, to create, to destroy, to love, to hate? Is that just a natural function of nature?
I think Colonel Kurtz was only pursued by the government because they couldn't control him anymore.
But out there with these natives, it must be a temptation to be God. He's out there operating without any decent restraint, and he's still in the field commanding troops.
Terminate with extreme prejudice.
One of my favorite lines from that movie, or several good lines, he says they wouldn't let them write the F word on the sides of bombers because they thought it was obscene. So, and that's absurd because it's obscene to write the F word which is actually which is a word to describe a human act, on top of a killing device, which is there to kill
Which
people.
is true obscenity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another great line is
Charging a man with murder in this place was like handing out speeding tickets at the Indy 500.
I read a book called Bloods, which is it's actually about the African American experience in war in general. It's a seminal classic. They were talking about, I remember one of the soldiers said Apocalypse Now got it all wrong. He said that his take on Apocalypse Now was that it was saying that when we go to war, we actually go insane. And his idea is that we're actually insane all along, and that the war is it just allows that part of us to come out. So I thought that was a very interesting idea. That I guess that supports the idea that kind of sort of insanity that we see manifest in war is with us all the time.
I want to follow up on Kurtz with Blood Meridian and Judge Holden, and this might be like tougher to talk about because you guys aren't really familiar with Blood Meridian.
And we don't know how to read either, so we probably
that's a
never
problem
will be.
too.
Unless they make a movie.
Yeah, and you guys don't respond to anything but sign language. So this is going to be a particularly slow segment. Well, next to American Psycho, it's the most harrowing novel I've ever read.
Before we go, you talked about the name of the author and what are the other things that he's...
Well, Cormac McCarthy wrote No Country for Old Men and The Road. That's what he's probably most
right.
famous. Oh, and All the Pretty Horses.
Okay.
He's a very highly respected author.
Blood Meridian is the ultimate Western. It is a historically, closely based account of a terrifying scalping expedition organized by Mexican and Texan authorities in 1849-50 to simply wipe out all of the southwestern Native Americans in order to clear the way to the gold fields. The Glanton Gang, an extraordinary group of freebooters or filibusters, have with them as their spiritual leader a frightening manifestation, a Melvillian, a kind of human Moby Dick, Judge Holden, who is a vast albino fellow at 7 foot tall and who has all languages, all knowledges, and who preaches endlessly the theology of violence and war.
The judge meticulously collects specimens and sketches during their expedition.
Like a Lewis and Clark thing.
Yeah, so he's asked by one of the badasses he's traveling with, why? What's the point of this? These guys are just destroying everything in their path.
Women and children also.
Women, children, Mexicans, everybody. No scalp is left untorn from its head. What's the point of all this? He says, and he wants to become aware of everything that exists because whatever in creation exists without my knowledge exists without my consent.
That's like a God complex.
Exactly.
That's arrogance.
That's like narcissistic, pathological. That's just...
He says you can find meanness in the least of creatures, but when God made man, the devil was at his elbow.
And that's kind of... that sounds like that's a justification. Saying, oh, well, it's always been there, so I might as well be evil.
Well, is there such a thing as right or wrong? Are we right or wrong for practical reasons or because there really is a higher ethics and morality that we are loyal to, or we should be loyal to? Are we right, or are we civil to each other just because it makes sense to be civil to each other because it allows us to work together, or do we do it because it's just the right thing to do? It's practical for us to sit here and treat each other well.
Do you follow the law because you're afraid of the consequences of not obeying?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do.
I tried to run the ship properly with a book, but they fought me at every turn. If the crew wanted to walk around with their shirt tails hanging out, that's all right. Let them. But they encouraged the crew to go around scoffing at me and spreading wild rumors about steaming in circles. And I was to blame for Lieutenant Merrick's incompetence and poor seamanship. Lieutenant Merrick was the perfect officer, but not Captain Queeg.
Back in school, my English teacher, and was that junior year of high school, had us read The Caine Mutiny, and I loved it. I loved the movie. At the same time, the movie A Few Good Men came out, and I remember with Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, and I showed my teacher, and she actually hadn't seen it, and she loved it. She said, "This is great," but the whole time, I remember we were drawing parallels between the two. But I always loved that play.
I'll read the IMDb description of the movie. It's or the story. When a U.S. naval captain shows signs of mental instability that jeopardizes the ship, the first officer relieves him of command and faces court-martial for mutiny.
Captain, we have to maneuver for the safety of the ship. We received no orders to maneuver.
The villain is, what was his name? Kiefer.
Well, the funny thing is when you tell his name, everybody knows his actor. Yeah. He's the father in My Three Sons.
Fred McMurray.
Yes,
right.
That's the actor who plays him, and that's you were telling me about it. I said that's the father from My Three Sons.
Oh, he was the villain.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Lane, because he plays this very. He kind of plays this. He's the doctor, right?
No, he's not the doctor.
But his character is kind of meek. And
he's not in a position of power,
right?
But he's in a position where he can manipulate those above him to take action on his behalf.
Article 184. It is conceivable that most unusual and extraordinary circumstances may arise in which the relief from duty of a commanding officer by a subordinate becomes necessary, either by placing him under arrest or on the sick list. Such action shall never be taken without the approval of the Navy Department, except when it is impracticable because of the delay involved. If I were you, Steve, I'd memorize it.
The man above him who actually is put on trial for mutiny, he's convinced by this guy Kiefer during the course of this, their stay at sea, Queeg is just unstable. And he points out, here's the psychological rationale for why.
Has the thought ever occurred to you that our captain might be unbalanced?
Oh, cut the jokes, Tom.
I'm no psychiatrist, but I know something about abnormal behavior. Captain Queeg has every symptom of acute paranoia. It's just a question of time before he goes over the line.
You're fooling with dynamite, Tom.
Will you look at the man? He's a Freudian delight. He crawls with clues. His fixation on the little rolling balls, the chattering in second-hand phrases and slogans, his inability to look you in the eye, the constant migraine headaches.
And he doesn't even want to think about this. This is insubordination. But he's eventually convinced by the prodding of Fred McMurray's character to relieve him of command. What winds up happening is when he does go to trial, this guy Kiefer pulls himself out of the consideration for being subject to mutiny.
Are you a psychiatrist, Mr. Kiefer? No, I'm a writer. It's my business to be a judge of human behavior.
I see. And you were the first one to notice the captain's psychotic symptoms?
Yes.
You explained all this very carefully to Mr. Marek, of course.
I discussed it, yes.
Well, that's an interesting point. Would you be prepared to repeat it on the witness stand? You ought to take a look at Article 186 of Navy Regulations. An officer relieving his commanding officer or recommending such action, together with all others who so counsel, must bear the legitimate responsibility for and must be prepared to justify such action.
I'm not on trial. If I were, I'd take the rap with the others.
Too bad we can't use you as an expert on psychiatry. After all, you made the diagnosis.
He was. I guess he was the puppet master, trying to just not leave any kind of direct trace of his involvement. I had an uncle who fought in the Pacific during World War II. I think he started off he was stationed in New Guinea, where the Japanese were invading. He had told this story one time how they had pulled a joke on these like new recruits that had just signed up or who were just I guess were transported over there or whatever. My uncle said that they had found this body of like this Japanese soldier who didn't have like any kind of like visible sort of wounds on the front of him or anything. So what they did is they propped this soldier up against a tree and put a cigarette in his mouth and like put like the rifle in his hand. So basically, so these guys would think this is like a living like Japanese soldier. So my uncle said when the new guys came around, they saw this like Japanese, what they thought was a live Japanese soldier there, and they just, now you would think that's like, desecrating a body, but in that kind of like awful sort of situation, they use somebody's physical dead body for a joke. It's like a whole different kind of reality that you have to deal with there.
Wow.
And towards the end of this particular uncle's life, he had said to my father that he was actually feeling regret over all the people that he killed in the war. It's like all those Japanese soldiers that I killed. And my dad tried to like put his mind at ease, like saying, "Well, Al, you were just doing what you had to do. I mean, if you didn't kill them, they were going to kill you." So I mean, and this might be the reaction of like a normal person, feeling the guilt of ending someone else's life. If it were like a villain, it might be, I killed, Yeah,
because that's post-war time. He's in a period of peace. The idea of guilt actually coming to him, it's only relative to where he is at that point in his life.
Well, that's true.
He has the luxury of having those guilty feelings.
Yeah.
Like you say, do villainous acts make me a villain? Well, who's calling you a villain? Are you calling yourself a villain, or is it an external definition that people place upon you?
There's this quote which I hope you can find. It was sampled, actually. Jedi Mind Trick sampled it and put it into one of their rap songs from Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now, where it starts off. He says, "In a war, something about we have to often make, take actions that we wouldn't ordinarily commit in regular life," something like that. And I wonder about that. I wonder about, well, what happens then in those? Are there special circumstances where we can commit villainous acts, but then we're not villains, or is that what's happening in the mind of a villain, or even in the construct of a villain in fiction, that there are special circumstances that allow them to do what they're going to do, and I wonder if is that what drives this, the dark side of humanity, or is there an innate desire just to be a villain?
The last one I have is a lot lighter than these two. It's Luther from the Warriors.
Can I say it? Warriors, come out and play.
Warriors, come out to play.
Is that the one that has like all the weird gangs? Is that like a 70s? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We always ask ourselves, like evil people, why did they do what they do? Why did they make these decisions? What is it? Is it about power? You just get off on it? Are they just have a inverted sense of reality?
I guess maybe the criteria for a villain is somebody who willingly makes a decision that will harm others.
So yes, and to that point, Luther is asked at the end of the Warriors by Swan, the leader of the Warriors,
"Why'd you do it? Why'd you waste Cyrus?"
No reason. I just like doing things like that.
No reason. I just like doing things like that. That reasoning is the best line, at best answer I've ever heard a villain ever.
I just like it.
He hasn't thought it through.
Wait, here's something.
He's not thinking about what because I wasn't loved when I was a kid. Because my father.
Is Cyrus a villain? If Cyrus had lived, would he
Arguably.
Because Cyrus's plan was to unite all the gangs and then just basically take over New York. And I can't see this as a good thing.
No.
But yet the whole movie is about preserving, redeeming Cyrus's memory.
Man. But that's
it's content. Yes. Yeah.
Because when you compare, Luther's actions to Cyrus, well, Luther's was completely self-serving. At least with Cyrus, all of the gangs would benefit.
But not New York, and not
New York,
and not regular people.
Right. But Cyrus was like the Gandhi of gangs.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
And he's going to unite all those weird gangs. The guys dressed up like baseball, and with the regular gangs who wear no shirts, and the biker dudes, and
then they had like this like bald gang and stuff.
The bald gang. I wouldn't be part of that gang.
The baldies.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
This is J.D. Salinger. Don't let me catch you being a phony. Come shoot the bull with us here at the Creative Impulse Podcast.
Jerry, what are you doing?
What?
What do you mean, what? You're not J.D. Salinger.
They don't know that. This guy's a famous recluse. Who knows what he sounds like anyway?
JD's right.
J.D., you mean Jerry.
This is Steve Perry of Journey, and I want to say, don't stop believing in the Creative Impulse Podcast. This is Theater of the Mind, dude, and I'm stone in love for the Creative Impulse.
Stop.
Those crazy nights, I do remember.
Gentlemen, it is difficult to admit to an error.
Well, first I'll talk about George Armstrong Custer. He was a villain in this movie called Little Big Man.
A historical figure.
Yeah, historical figure. The movie is about this character named Jack Crabbe, who is about 117 or something, and he's going over his reminiscences, and you're not really sure whether it's essentially a tall tale or whatever. But.
My name is Jack Crabbe, and I am the sole white survivor of the Battle of Little Big Horn.
During the course of his adventures, he runs into Custer, and now the whole thing with Jack Crabbe is he kind of goes back and forth, living among the cowboys, and then living among the Native Americans. And when he first meets Custer, he thinks, "Oh, this is what a noble guy, what a heroic guy." And he actually says this to the Indians. He's a great man and all this stuff. But then at some point he sees Custer and his men riding through this Indian village, and you hear this like flute, this like a fife and drum kind of sound. It's like a specific like tune you would like recognize because it comes into play later. And they massacre this like Indian village. So later on, you have the character Jack Crabbe, who is living happily among the Indians. It seems like he's finally found himself. He has a wife. He has a small child. Everything's going great. He's the happiest he's ever been. Then he hears like the fife and drum in the background, and it's like snowing. And they do this whole slow motion sort of thing where Custer's men come riding into this village and just they just slaughter everybody. And they have this one heartbreaking scene where Jack Crabbe's wife is running away from the soldiers carrying the baby, but then you see her get shot in the back, and you just kind of assume that like both she and his child have been killed. So I mean, you really get to see like what the nature of this heroic character is. And what was funny is before this, but I think before they did this movie, Custer was largely portrayed as a heroic
As a Civil
figure.
War hero.
Yeah, he's a Civil War hero who just had a knack for knowing how to get noticed, because I think he had his own uniform design specifically, but he was. I think he was thought of as a hero in a lot of movies, like up to this point. I think this is one of the first movies to portray him as a bit of a monster. And what happens at the end of the movie? I think Jack Crabbe kind of takes advantage of this guy's arrogance, of Custer's arrogance, and that Custer and his men are about to go riding into Little Bighorn, and Custer, knowing this guy, says, "All right, Mule Skinner, what do you think? What should we do?" And so, knowing how Custer was going to react, he's like, "Okay, then I'll do the opposite. I'll do what you say. Because you're just trying to scare me off." So he manipulates him. So naturally, Custer gets his ass handed to him.
So he uses his ego against him.
Yeah.
There are thousands of Indians down there. And when they get done with you, there won't be nothing left but a greasy spot. This ain't the Washita River, General. And them ain't helpless women and children waiting for you. The Cheyenne brave and Sioux. You go down there if you got the nerve.
Still trying to outsmart me, aren't you, Mule Skinner? You want me to think that you don't want me to go down there, but the subtle truth is you really don't want me to go down there.
Yeah, I'd also chosen Lex Luthor from Smallville. The actor Michael Rosenbaum who portrayed him won all kinds of Saturn awards for his portrayal.
So how does it differ?
What happens the first time you see Lex Luthor in Smallville? He's just this cocky kid. He rolls his Porsche over the side of a bridge, and it just so happens Clark Kent is nearby, and he dives into the water and he pulls Lex Luthor out, and so they become good friends because of this, and but at the same time, that whole accident sort of becomes like the seeds of how they become enemies, on his journey to the dark side. Lex Luthor just becomes obsessed. Like, how did this guy physically, it's almost impossible that this guy rescued me. Of course, by the end of it, Lex Luthor becomes what Lex Luthor is known for. I think the famous soundbite that they would play of him all the time is where they had this episode to where Lex Luthor was divided into like two personas, like his good persona, his bad persona, and at the time the character was like his good persona, and so you got a view of like what the dark side was like, and there's just a soundbite of what the the dark side of the character says. Like,
You were right about me all along, Mr. Kent. I am the villain of the story.
and so and I think like when they aired like the final episode where you see Lex Luthor finally comes back and he assumes this role as like the mastermind. He'd been building up to this point. I think his portrayal of Lex Luthor was very interesting. I mean, he made Lex Luthor sympathetic. He had a bastard of a father, and his evil, I think, kind of evolved through the way that he was forced to interact with his father.
Does a real villain know that they're a villain?
Well, that's what we started with.
Well,
does a villain see themselves as the hero in their own story?
Well, do they, Lane?
I have a question though, since you brought up Lex Luthor, which also connects in a way to Kurtz,
Colonel Kurtz,
to Judge Holden. A bald, pate, is it?
I think that represents
representing
intellectual, because there's the fear of the intellectual. Just people fear they fear intelligent people, or they're threatened by intelligent
people. But does a bald head
and some
also remind one of a baby? Does it seem like a purity,
infantile,
which makes it even scarier?
Or maybe it's barren.
Or alien.
Barren, there's no life there, hair representing growth and life.
Yeah,
something alien.
You think of hair as like representing like youth.
Well, Darth Vader also is bald.
Inhuman. Maybe
right?
The baldness is inhuman, because it's like you're like a freak. You're a hairless freak.
The way a character looks, do you think that's like a big part of...
We project villainy into ugly people. And then some writers are play with the irony of that.
That's right.
They make
That's
some
exactly right.
Some writers make their villains look innocuous. Some make their villains complicated. They give them these wonderful characters. They make them wealthy, well dressed, nice people.
Well, I'm thinking of like was it M with Peter Lorre, who is a very odd looking character. He's like transmitting something's off.
Right,
because he doesn't look normal.
Yeah.
There must be something wrong with him.
Look at Hans Stavro Blofeld's eye, his weird eye, and the way he's always stroking that cat. That's so creepy.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am Ernst Stavro Blofeld.
But then there are times when they try to confound expectations, like Henry Fonda in Once Upon a Time in the West.
So you found out you're not a businessman after all.
Just a man. Nothing matters now, not the land, not the money, not the woman.
Because you always would see Henry Fonda as this good guy, but he's just like a real badass villain in that movie.
Sergio Leone asked me to do a film and sent me the script, and I just couldn't believe it. And in the months before I went, I kept thinking, now, this heavy son of a bitch, how am I going to... I finally went to an optometrist and had contact lenses made to make my baby blues brown. And I arrive at the studio in Rome, and Sergio takes one look at me and says, off. And my opening scene in the film, and you see 5 or 6 long robe, brimmed hat characters that you don't recognize, but just ominous looking, converging from the sagebrush with rifles and handguns. And this terrible moment that you just watched a farm family massacred. And they start to walk towards you, converging towards you, and then the camera switches back to the little boy who's standing there just petrified, watching these people come to him. And then into the foreground of the little boy comes a figure. The camera very slowly is coming around. And Sergio Leone had cast me because he could imagine at this moment the audience saying, Jesus Christ, it's Henry Fonda!
Come on, vampires! Nasty! Let's annihilate them for justice and for the safety of puppies and Christmas, right? Let's fight that evil! Let's kill something! Oh, come on!
Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Well, he had sort of like the opposite kind of journey from the Lex Luthor character in Smallville. Spike started off as like a really major bad guy. He was a really vicious vampire who they actually had planned to kill off, like after the one particular episode he was in. But he had such a positive fan reaction that they kept him around. Now the turning point was during the course of the series is they implanted this chip in his head that prevented him from doing any harm to people. I mean, he had the urge. He still wanted to like kill people and feed as a vampire. But the thing is, if he did, this chip would just like, no, just like it would cause him this intense like pain and render him physically unable to to harm other people. But during the course of the series, because I guess he eventually adjusted this sort of like way of doing things, and then he falls for the main character. He falls for Buffy, and at the very end of the series, he's actually come far enough along to where he actually saves the world while Buffy and her friends are escaping this final sort of confrontation. Spike just absorbs all this energy and gets destroyed in the process, and he saves the world. Although he does come back an angel like a few months later, but still.
Why would he be your favorite villain? Because he transforms from?
Yeah, I thought...
your expectations are kind of overturned?
Yeah, but I guess it shows that villains do have... Some villains, I guess, have the capacity to change. I don't know.
Even villains have feelings.
Even villains want to be loved.
Eventually, he goes on a mission to get his soul. Eventually, he gets a. Vampires in the Buffy universe, I guess vampires don't have souls, and eventually, Spike goes on a little mission to actually acquire a soul.
Did he go to a disco to get a soul, or did he mean he went to
Sears?
He went to Soul Train because he
sold
because he thought they had an excess amount of soul there.
Yeah.
Don Cornelius gave him his soul.
You're out of control, dude. That's the plot of a show. Don Cornelius gave him
selling souls.
That's awesome.
Across the country.
That's awesome.
On a literal train, right?
Did you see?
That's right.
Did you see?
It's a mobile.
Did you see
Soul
Doctor Who
selling
last week?
Yeah. I did.
Did you see what happened with that Dalek? Remember when the Dalek was damaged, so it developed humanity. But that Dalek, remember how concluded the idea was the Dalek had these positive emotions, and then the Dalek it had suppressed those memories, and once those memories were restored, the Dalek it regained its humanity, and actually not a self-hatred, but a hatred of its own kind.
It's funny you said it regained its humanity. They're not human.
But what was actually
so how do you define humanity?
That's funny. It's right. Although right, often when me and other people often we say humanity, we're talking about ethics and morality, but we're using the word humanity as though it's a human thing. So maybe the idea is it found this
conversation's even calling that into question.
But
yeah, exactly, because humanity is not just ethics or positive ethics and positive values. It's a little bit of both, or the human experience is more than that.
But the interesting twist that they had at the very end, the doctor says, okay, well, I'll try to return him to this point where he has, like, I guess, humanity, for lack of a better word. So, look into my mind, look at all these wonders, look at all this beauty and stuff. I guess he sees that, but then he sees the
hatred.
He sees the hatred, I think, within the doctor, and then he just goes back to being...
He's the killer of Daleks.
Yeah.
The Daleks must survive! The Daleks have failed! Why don't you finish the job and make the Daleks extinct? Rid the universe of your filth! Why don't you just die?
The Daleks have a choice but to be evil. That's just their programming to commit acts of violence. They're programming. They're compelled.
Well, they're like a slug.
They are organic creatures.
But wait a minute.
You're saying it's in their DNA as created by Davros.
Being a good Dalek meant there's some sort of malfunction. Do they have the capacity to be good? I don't think so. I think that was the Doctor's point. So why do we like villains so much? What is it about villains? Why do we think about this? Why are villains so entertaining?
Because they do the things that each of us would like to do if we could be free of the repercussions that would come from acting in that way.
Megalomaniacal.
I mean, wouldn't you like to Darth Vader, blow up an entire planet?
But I don't think it's just that I want to be. I don't think it's that I want to be Darth Vader.
Wow.
I think that there is something. I think it's simpler. I think there's just something thrilling about them, but I don't think I have the desire to actually. I think I want to explore these things. I'm curious about these things. I wonder about the possibility, but I don't think I don't think anywhere I actually have the desire to do what a villain does.
Here's what I would suggest: we follow the letter of the law because we know that there are repercussions if we don't.
Most of the time,
we know that we'll be punished if we don't. There's that, but then there's also our conscience, which we have to live with. Those of us who have a conscience. What if you were freed from that, like the Daleks? What if you could operate freely and just indulge your every whim? not thinking about, well, what are the ramifications of acting in that way, but just to be free to act the way you want. I think there's something liberating there that draws us to villains.
I was just going to say, there's this MMO, massively multiplayer online game. I play a Star Wars game, and in particular, you have the option. You could either be, you get a choice between the factions. You can either be on the Empire side, or you could be on the Republic side. But on either side, you can make light side decisions and dark side decisions. So you have the opportunity to play like a real hero kind of guy, or somebody who ends up being a villain. I have a character or two in this game who I've turned into a villain, just because sometimes it's kind of fun. But I think there's an element of like, okay, well, this is stuff you just can't do like in real life, and you would this is stuff you would never do to like other people because of the consequences, But in a game like this, I mean, there's no like real consequences. But I guess you get a taste of like being the bad guy by being able to make these decisions
by
in this
playing
game.
it in a massive multimedia online game.
Well, then there's the question of, do villains operate under the delusion of like some serious justification that they're rationalizing all the time? There is that question. Or do they not even bother with that? They know that what they're doing is vile, but they don't care. Like Natural Born Killers.
Mickey and Mallory know the difference between right and wrong. They just don't give a damn.
Yeah, that a lot of the dark side choices that you make in this game are actually not the best choices that you can make. They're not like the rational sort of choices. Sometimes they're just like uncharacteristically sort of like mean sort of choices that you would make, where you opt to like kill somebody who you don't need to kill, or you just do some like unnecessarily bad thing, even though it isn't necessarily the most beneficial thing you could do for the situation.
I don't think we've answered any of these questions, which is okay. I think we've actually opened up the door to more questions. Hey, if anybody out there has got any thoughts, feel free to write us and post on our page, and we'll see if we can address those things in a later episode.
What's that website again?
TheCreativeImpulse.com.
No.
What is our website again? Is it TCIP.com? I don't know. What is a motherfucker?
You don't know our website?
Oh, TheCreativeImpulsePodcast.com. You son of a... I hope that didn't record me. Our website is TheCreativeImpulsePodcast.com.
Yes.
Feel free to check us out there and write in your thoughts.
And give us a good rating on iTunes.
About what villains are. And give us a good rating. Until next time, be careful out there, because life sucks.
We need a better closer than that.
All right. Everybody out there, stay safe and don't be a villain. Avoid the villains. Live long and prosper.
No, we need a thematic ending. Be good.
Don't hate me because I'm beautiful.
Don't hate me because I'm a villain. I can't help myself.